Hey, sixth graders, welcome back. Today, what we're going to get into, I think I'll go ahead and say this first. The lesson part is going to be a little shorter than I have had, but I want your project to be a little bit longer than it was before. It's deserving. So, the first part here, the lesson I'm going to teach, is about Pacific Northwest climate, the climate we have around here in Washington State, which, if you know anything about Washington State, we got two totally different climates in Western Washington. We got like it rains a lot, but then in Eastern Washington, it's a desert. And what I want to get into is why is that? Why? What's going on there to make that happen? Washington State is like two states in one, as far as climate goes. So here we are with the types of weather was the last assignment we just did. Now, assignment number 31 is going to be Northwest climate, okay? This is the kind of climate we have here in Washington State. Northwest climate. Alrighty, so anyway, you might have noticed that we kind of running out of room on the assignment sheet. That's okay. I think this is going to be the last one we do with the assignment sheet. Okay, so we'll be starting something different starting next week. It'll be a project we're going to be doing about bees. So you don't have to sweat about the assignment sheet being finished up. I think this is going to be the last time we use it. I suppose it's possible I could send one that you can print out, but I don't think we're going to bother doing that. Okay, so anyway, let's get ready with your piece of paper, and here you go, Northwest climate. Bingo. Okay, so this lesson is about Northwest climate, and the idea here is what's called rain shadow. Please go ahead and write that down as your title of your assignment here on your paper. And so again, the climate here in the Northwest, we go all the way from having rainforest in one part of the state and desert in another part of the state. By the way, this is a place called Dry Falls. I love this spot. It's one of my favorite places in the whole world. Interesting, fascinating geology going on there. Anyway, rain shadow. Everybody say rain shadow. Rain shadow. Okay, now remember what we talked about what makes clouds form. Okay, condensation it is when the water goes from a vapor in the air, humidity it's called, to becoming liquid water drops. Remember, from what we learned before, it's when air is rising up that it cools down and reaches the dew point, and then that is going to cause it to turn from water vapor, where the molecules aren't attached to each other, to where now it slows down enough where they can stick to each other, okay? And that means they start becoming little tiny droplets, becoming bigger droplets, cloud droplets, and then if you get enough of those accumulating, it can become raindrops. But the clouds are liquid water. It goes from a water vapor that's just individual molecules, it's invisible, you can't see it, to becoming liquid water in droplet form, and we call those clouds. And remember, what makes the cumulus clouds form is when the air is rising up and it reaches the dew point. Remember I told you in that lesson before that the dew point is the flat bottom of the clouds, which is kind of interesting. And another thing that makes it happen is when you get cold air runs into hot air, and the hot air pushes the cold air pushes the hot air up because hot air rises because it's less dense. And so that rising warm air, and that's called a front, a weather front. Okay, so those are things that make clouds form and make eventually enough to become rain. Well, there's another thing that can do it. Is when the air rises, but not because it hits another air mass, but because it hits a mountain and it starts going up the mountain. So landforms can actually cause the water to condense and to become, well, you'll get more rainfall that way. Okay, so this is Google Earth now. There's Africa here. And now it's something else that's worth mentioning about climate. And I wish if we were still in the classroom and we had more time and more class periods, I'd gone into why it is. It's because of rising and falling air. Also, about why do you have this area right here of rainforest? Well, that's because you tend to have rising air because at the equator, because that's the warmest area and warm air rises. And then you get sinking air here, and you get like the Sahara Desert. And what's interesting is you have that desert go across the southwest, if I can keep it oriented here, and it goes across, the southern hemisphere, the Gobi Desert and that kind of stuff. So anyway, you have this strip of climate zones here that is also basically caused by rising and falling air. But that's kind of a global phenomenon. Let's take a look at the Pacific Northwest here. We zoom in, and here's our region of the country. And you probably recognize this as being the Olympic Mountains. And there's Puget Sound and the Cascade Mountains. And over here you have desert. Okay, so in the middle of this desert here, and you got rainforest over here. See how green that is? And you see how brown that is? This is a desert region. And now it's got green, but this green is caused by irrigation, okay? These are all fields that are being watered by farmers and stuff like that is to irrigate. But what you have without the fields is desert. And by the way, the geology that caused this particular thing here, this is massive flood. Maybe you'll be in my class next year, and I'll tell you what caused this. These features here are amazing, but that's more of a 7th grade thing. When we get into earth science in 7th grade, I'll teach about that. But here we have the green in western Washington, west of the Cascades, and then you have the desert in eastern Washington. Again, the only green here is by irrigation with the farmlands and these sort of circular fields where they have circular sprinkler systems. And that comes from these dams here. They dam the Columbia River, and then they pipe the water out to water the fields, which is kind of why we have so much agriculture like apples and stuff in Washington State, even though it's a desert there. So why is it that we have green over here and desert over here? Okay, here's Washington State. Again, it's really green over here in western Washington and in the Columbia Basin in eastern Washington. It's desert. Now, one thing that makes this happen, why there's so much rainfall in Washington State on our side of the Cascades. Our side of the Cascades over here is nice and green, whereas this side is desert, right, on the eastern side. Well, the reason is we have our wind comes blowing off of the ocean. And of course, if you have wind blowing off the ocean, it's going to have a lot of humidity in it, right? A lot of moisture. And so if you have the wind moving in off the ocean and it hits the mountains, it's going to go up the mountains. It's going to get pushed. Well, what's it going to do? It has to. What's it going to do? It's got to go up over the mountains. And remember, rising air causes condensation, causes clouds. So it rains so much in western Washington for 2 reasons. One is our air already has a lot of humidity in it, a lot of moisture coming off the oceans. 2, when it starts going up in altitude, that's going to make the rain condense. Here, check this out.